Brandon Lewis here of Embedded Computing Design, and we're here at ARM TechCon 2018, which is the first day of the show opening, technically the second day of the show, but first day of the show opening. And we're at booth 1032, which is Tortuga Logic, and I'm here with Johnny Valamehr, who is the co-founder, COO, and a doctor who works, and also a magician at Tortuga Logic. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you, Brandon?
Doing well, thank you.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a great show, and this is really one of the first stops we've made at a booth, and we stumbled upon Tortuga Logic, who's doing a lot of security, and we know that today with the Internet of Things and just how complex chips are getting too, that security is becoming a really, really major issue. Lately, earlier this year, end of last year, there were a couple vulnerabilities that were recognized within Intel and ARM and AMD processors, Spectre and Meltdown.
Yep.
Can you elaborate a little bit on those and tell us exactly what was going on?
Absolutely. So Meltdown and Spectre are two different sorts of security vulnerabilities that are found at the chip design level. So this is different than a lot of vulnerabilities I found at the software level, which don't have anything to do with the actual hardware implementation. But these have to do with the hardware itself.
Right.
And so both of these were enabled in a sense, because we have been for tens of years we've been doing performance enhancements so that we can get faster chips without really thinking about the security ramifications. And so both of the Meltdown and Spectre and all the variants have to do with what's known as speculative execution, where you're doing sorts of computation, or you're doing some sort of something before it's needed in order to have a faster performance in a sense. And so some of those things that are being done that are prior to what they should be doing, they leave clues as to what the data is for a different process or anything like that. And so it basically allows vulnerabilities to come out when you're doing things that you weren't supposed to be doing anyway.
Right. So with speculative execution, what we're talking about is something similar to or including branch prediction, where you're trying to project ahead, which branch you're going to take to speed up the processor.
Absolutely.
But also in the process of doing so, you're exposing some sort of information about the processes that the processor itself contains. So.
Yeah, exactly. So you can imagine if a program can go two different ways based on some information.
Right.
If we want to make sure that we don't slow down by doing one and it was the wrong way to go.
Right.
So we can actually do both, or we can predict which way to go. And sometimes when we do both, or we predict which way to go, we're doing what isn't supposed to be done, and that can lead to security vulnerabilities in a sense. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So Tortuga Logic has been around for 5 years or so now. I became familiar with you a couple of years ago, and you do some verification, work. Can you explain the type of verification you do versus the type of verification that a lot of embedded engineers are familiar with, which is usually functional and formal?
Absolutely. Yeah. So most of the verification technologies that are out there today, they're meant to be used for functional verification. And so that's to make sure that the system's doing what you think it should be doing, in a sense, right? So what's different for security verification is oftentimes things are happening that you don't know may be happening, and you don't know how to look for them, right? So it's not you're looking for something that you know, you're looking for things that you don't know about that could be resident in the system, right? And so what we do is alongside anyone's functional verification tools, we provide security verification on top of that, so they can, while they're doing their normal tests to make sure their chip works, they can also make sure that there are no security vulnerabilities. And it's especially prudent for ARM customers, let's say, and that's why we're at ARM TechCon. ARM has a lot of different security things that are very important, so like trust zone, their platform security architecture, these sort of things. And so it's great that ARM provides those. But if you, as a designer, change those in any way, whether you're doing hardware configurations or software customizations, you don't know if you broke the security of the system anymore. And so that's where we come in. We provide tools that check the design as you're making it to say, you're still good, or there's a problem, you need to fix it here. So
does security verification impact the development cycle, or does it preclude the use of formal verification or other simulation or tools at all?
Yeah, great question. So one of the value propositions that we try to exude here at Tortuga is we don't want to add any overhead to the standard functional verification. And so what we do is we're bolting on and integrating right into those tools. And at the same time you're doing functional verification, you're doing security verification as well. So you're doing it at the same time in a sense. And there's a second question you asked about
Does it slow down the
the
workflow
formal,
and does it work in tandem with or preclude the use of a formal verification tool?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. So the technology that we have in the company allows us to do the security verification at every stage of verification. So whether you're using formal, whether you're using simulation, whether you're using emulation, we can bolt on to those platforms and provide security. And so the tool that we're talking about most today is Unison, which is our simulation platform in a sense. So while you're doing your standard functional verification for simulation, you do the security as well. That's the product we're talking about most today here. So.
Very cool. Well, if you're interested in learning more, why don't you stop by booth 1032 at ARM TechCon 2018. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.